Have you ever noticed how your baby can fall into the deepest sleep imaginable while resting peacefully in your arms, only to wake up seconds after you gently place them in the crib?
Almost there.
Maybe you've spent nearly an hour walking through the house in complete silence, swaying from side to side until your legs ache and your shoulders feel heavy. You finally look down and see those tiny eyelids close. Their breathing becomes slow and steady. Their little fingers loosen their grip on your shirt. Their whole body relaxes against your chest. And for just a moment you think you've done it. You slowly walk toward the crib. Every movement feels carefully calculated. You bend your knees. You lower them inch by inch, barely breathing yourself, hoping this time will be different. Then, almost like clockwork, their eyebrows twitch. Their tiny hands move. Their eyes slowly open. Within seconds, they're crying again. So you pick them back up. And almost instantly everything changes. Their breathing slows. Their muscles soften. Their little head finds its favorite spot against your shoulder. Within moments, they're asleep again, as if nothing had happened. If you've ever experienced this, you've probably asked yourself the same question that millions of exhausted parents ask every single night. Am I doing something wrong? Maybe someone has already told you that you're creating bad habits. Maybe you've heard that your baby is becoming too dependent on you. Maybe you've even found yourself scrolling through parenting forums at 2 o'clock in the morning, wondering why every other baby seems capable of sleeping alone while yours only wants your arms. And after hearing enough opinions from relatives, friends, strangers on the internet, and even outdated parenting advice, it's easy to begin questioning yourself. You start wondering whether every cuddle today is creating a bigger problem tomorrow. But what if almost everything we've been taught about this behavior is backwards? Because modern developmental psychology, neuroscience, infant attachment research, and decades of studies on early childhood all point toward a very different conclusion. Your baby's desire to sleep in your arms isn't a sign that you're spoiling them. It isn't a sign that they're manipulating you. In fact, it's one of the strongest indicators that their brain is doing exactly what millions of years of human evolution designed it to do. Today, we're going to explore something that completely changed the way scientists understand babies. We'll discover why newborns crave physical contact, why your heartbeat does far more than simply comfort them, why your arms become part of their developing nervous system, and why one day you'll probably look back at these sleepless nights with far more gratitude than frustration. Because once you understand what's actually happening inside your baby's brain, you'll never see these moments the same way again. To understand why your baby only wants to sleep in your arms, we first need to go back to a place they've known longer than anywhere else: the womb. For around 40 weeks, your baby lived inside an environment that was almost perfectly designed for their developing nervous system. There were no bright lights suddenly appearing, no unexpected silence, no empty spaces. Every second of every day, they were surrounded by warmth. They never felt alone because, biologically speaking, they couldn't be. Your heartbeat echoed around them 24 hours a day. Every breath you took gently rocked their tiny body. Every step you walked created a familiar rhythm. Even when you were sitting quietly, your body constantly provided movement, sound, warmth, and gentle pressure. Imagine living somewhere for 9 months where every single need was met automatically before you even realized you had one. No hunger, no fear, no loneliness, no uncertainty. That was the only world your baby had ever known. Then, in a matter of minutes, everything changed. The room became brighter than anything they'd ever experienced. The temperature dropped. Gravity suddenly mattered. Strange sounds surrounded them. The constant pressure of the womb disappeared. And perhaps most importantly, the heartbeat that had surrounded them every second of their existence was no longer all around them. It was somewhere outside. As adults, we often forget how dramatic birth really is. Imagine waking up tomorrow on another planet. The air feels different. The temperature is unfamiliar. Every sound is new. Every face is unknown. Even your own body suddenly works differently. You would probably feel anxious, confused, and desperate for something familiar. Now imagine experiencing all of that without language, without memories, without understanding what had happened, and without any way of asking for help except crying. That's the world every newborn enters. This is why many developmental scientists describe the first few months after birth as something called the fourth trimester. Even though pregnancy has technically ended, your baby's brain is still expecting many of the same conditions it experienced before birth. And that's where one of the biggest misconceptions about babies begins. Most people assume babies are born with tiny versions of adult brains. They're not. In fact, the human brain is one of the least developed brains at birth compared to almost every other mammal. A newborn horse can stand within hours. Baby giraffes begin walking shortly after birth. Many primates can cling to their mothers almost immediately. Human babies, however, can't even hold up their own heads. Their vision is blurry. Their movements are uncoordinated. They rely entirely on another person's nervous system to help regulate their own. And there's an extraordinary reason for this. If human babies stayed inside the womb until their brains reached the same level of maturity as many other mammals, pregnancy wouldn't last 9 months. It would last almost 21 months. But evolution had to make a compromise. Our brains became so large that babies needed to be born much earlier than their neurological development was actually finished. In other words, a significant part of brain development happens after birth. Think about how incredible that is. Your baby's brain is literally under construction. Every day, every hour, every interaction, every cuddle, every gentle voice, every loving touch. These aren't just comforting moments. They're building moments. Scientists sometimes describe parents as external regulators. Before babies can regulate their own emotions, they borrow yours. Before they can calm themselves, they calm themselves through you. Before they understand safety, they experience your body as safety itself. This means something remarkable happens every time you hold your baby close. Your breathing begins influencing theirs. Your heartbeat helps stabilize theirs. Your body temperature helps regulate theirs. Your calm facial expression becomes information for their developing brain. Without saying a single word, you're teaching their nervous system one of the most important lessons it will ever learn. You are safe. And perhaps the most incredible part is that this isn't simply an emotional idea anymore. Scientists can actually measure it. In recent years, researchers began placing highly sensitive brain monitoring equipment on both parents and babies at the same time. What they discovered surprised even neuroscientists. When babies are held close, especially skin to skin, the electrical activity inside both brains begins changing together. Their brain waves gradually synchronize. Two separate nervous systems begin working almost like one connected system. It's almost impossible to imagine. Yet researchers have observed it happening again and again, which raises an extraordinary question. If your baby's brain becomes calmer, more organized, and more regulated while they're in your arms, what exactly happens inside that tiny brain? The moment you put them down, what happens next is something most parents never see, because it happens silently, deep inside a part of the brain that is still learning one of the most basic skills of being human: how to feel safe. When your baby falls asleep in your arms, their body isn't simply becoming tired. Their nervous system is receiving thousands of tiny signals that tell it, everything is okay. Their heart rate slows naturally. Their breathing becomes more regular. Levels of stress hormones begin to decrease. Muscles that were tense only moments before begin to relax. Even digestion starts working more efficiently. All of this happens because your baby's body recognizes something familiar, something it has known longer than it has known anything else in the world. You. Now imagine what happens during the transfer to the crib. From an adult perspective, it seems like a very small change. They're still asleep. The room hasn't changed. You're only placing them a few inches away from where they already were. But from your baby's perspective, almost everything changes at once. The warmth of your body disappears. The gentle rise and fall of your breathing is gone. The sound of your heartbeat becomes distant. The pressure around their body suddenly changes. The subtle movement that had rocked them continuously stops. Even your scent becomes weaker. To an adult brain, these changes barely register. To a newborn brain, they represent the sudden disappearance of nearly every signal associated with safety. And that's because newborns don't evaluate safety the way adults do. Adults ask, am I actually in danger? Babies ask something much simpler. Am I alone? For most of human history, those two questions meant exactly the same thing. Thousands of years ago, a baby separated from their caregiver wasn't simply uncomfortable. They were vulnerable. They couldn't find food. They couldn't regulate their body temperature. They couldn't defend themselves. They couldn't even move very far. Remaining close to a caregiver wasn't just comforting. It was necessary for survival. Evolution doesn't forget lessons like that. The human brain has been shaped over hundreds of thousands of years, while cribs, baby monitors, and separate nurseries have existed for only a tiny fraction of that time. Our modern homes may be safe, but your baby's nervous system hasn't evolved specifically for modern homes. It has evolved for human connection. That's why babies instinctively cry when they're separated. Not because they're trying to manipulate, not because they're demanding attention, not because they're becoming spoiled. They're following one of the oldest survival programs ever written into the human brain. In many ways, crying is your baby's emergency signal. It's the only language they have. Think about it this way. Adults can say, "I'm scared." We can say, "I'm lonely." We can ask someone for a hug. We can explain that we're anxious. Babies can't do any of that. They only have one communication system: crying. Every cry carries a message. I'm hungry. I'm uncomfortable. I'm overwhelmed. I'm tired. I need help regulating my body. And sometimes, I just need to know you're still here. One of the biggest misunderstandings in parenting is assuming that every cry has the same meaning. Doesn't. Just like adults cry for many different reasons, babies cry for many different reasons too. Sometimes they're hungry. Sometimes they're in pain. Sometimes they're overstimulated after a busy day. Sometimes they're simply exhausted but don't yet know how to fall asleep without help. And here's something fascinating. The younger the baby, the less capable they are of calming themselves after becoming distressed. Self-soothing isn't something babies are born knowing how to do. It's something they gradually learn through hundreds, then thousands, of experiences where someone else first soothed them. That's an important distinction. Babies don't learn emotional regulation by being left alone with overwhelming emotions. They learn emotional regulation by repeatedly experiencing regulation with another person. Every time you rock them, every time you whisper softly, every time you gently stroke their back, every time you respond with calm instead of panic, their brain quietly records that experience. Little by little, day after day, month after month, those experiences become the blueprint for how they'll eventually calm themselves. It's a little like learning to ride a bicycle. Nobody expects a child to balance perfectly the very first time they sit on one. At first, someone else provides stability. Eventually, the child begins balancing for short moments, then a little longer, until one day, without even realizing when it happened, they ride completely on their own. Emotional regulation develops in much the same way. Your calm becomes the training wheels. Eventually, your child develops their own balance. Ironically, this means something many parents find surprising. Children who experience consistent emotional safety early in life often become more independent later, not less. That may sound completely backwards. After all, wouldn't holding a baby all the time make them dependent? Research consistently suggests the opposite. Secure attachment doesn't create dependence. It creates confidence. Because confidence isn't built by forcing independence. Confidence grows from knowing that support is available whenever it's needed. Think about your own relationships. Who gives you the courage to face difficult situations? Usually, it's the people who make you feel safest. The people who never make you question whether they'll be there when you need them. Babies are no different. The safer they feel, the braver they become. That's why securely attached babies often crawl farther away from their parents during play. Not because they need their parents less, because they trust their parents more. They know they have a safe place to return to whenever the world feels overwhelming. Psychologists call this a secure base. Imagine standing at the edge of the ocean for the first time. Would you explore more confidently if you knew someone you trusted was standing right behind you? Of course you would. Your baby explores life exactly the same way. Every glance back toward you, every smile they give after discovering something new, every crawl back into your lap before heading off again. Those aren't signs of dependence. They're signs of security. And security is exactly what allows independence to grow. Perhaps that's one of the greatest paradoxes of early childhood. The children who are allowed to depend on someone when they genuinely need to, usually become the adults who depend on others the least. Because somewhere deep inside their developing brain, they've already learned one life-changing lesson. The world is a safe place, because someone was there for me when I needed them. One of the most beautiful things about infant development is that the biggest changes are almost invisible. Parents often wait for the obvious milestones, the first smile, the first word, the first step. But long before any of those happen, something extraordinary is quietly taking place beneath the surface. Your baby's brain is building a map of the world. Not a map of streets or cities, a map that answers one simple question. Is this world safe? Every experience becomes part of that map. Every comforting hug, every gentle voice during a frightening moment, every time you pick them up after they cry, every peaceful nap on your chest. Your baby isn't remembering these moments the way adults remember birthdays or vacations. They're far too young for that. Instead, their brain is collecting patterns. When I feel overwhelmed, someone comes. When I'm scared, someone stays. When I cry, someone responds. These repeated experiences slowly become expectations. And eventually, those expectations become beliefs. Not beliefs they can put into words, but beliefs that shape how they'll experience relationships for years to come. That's why psychologists often describe secure attachment as the foundation upon which emotional resilience is built. People sometimes imagine resilience as learning to handle everything alone, but that's not actually how resilience develops. True resilience begins with connection. Think about the strongest buildings in the world. They aren't built by making the walls stronger first. They're built by creating an incredibly stable foundation. The foundation is buried underground. Nobody sees it. Nobody compliments it. But without it, everything above eventually begins to crack. Your baby's emotional foundation works exactly the same way. Those countless hours you've spent holding them while everyone else was asleep. Those evenings when you walked around the house because nothing else seemed to help. Those moments when you questioned whether you were doing the right thing. They may have felt repetitive. They may have felt invisible. But they were never meaningless. In fact, those ordinary moments are often doing the most extraordinary work. Scientists have discovered that one of the brain's most important stress regulation systems develops rapidly during the first years of life. This system helps determine how we respond to challenges, uncertainty, disappointment, and fear, not only as children, but throughout adulthood. Here's the remarkable part. That system isn't shaped only by genetics. It's shaped by relationships. The repeated experience of being comforted teaches the developing brain that stress has an ending. That fear doesn't last forever. That difficult emotions can be survived. Imagine never learning that lesson. Imagine feeling overwhelmed and believing you'll stay overwhelmed forever. For a newborn, that's exactly what every uncomfortable moment feels like. They have no concept of time. They don't know you'll be back in 30 seconds. They don't know the diaper change will be over soon. They don't know that bedtime ends with morning. They only know what they're feeling right now. That's why your presence matters so much. You aren't simply removing discomfort. You're helping organize an experience that would otherwise feel impossible for them to understand. Another fascinating discovery from developmental psychology is something researchers call co-regulation. Before children can regulate themselves, someone regulates with them. Notice the wording. Not for them, with them. There's a profound difference. When you hold your baby during a difficult moment, your calm breathing influences theirs. Your relaxed muscles encourage their muscles to relax. Your slower heartbeat helps stabilize theirs. Even your facial expression becomes information. Babies spend an astonishing amount of time studying faces. Long before they understand words, they read emotions. If your face communicates calm, their nervous system begins borrowing that calm. This is why pediatricians often encourage parents to slow their own breathing when comforting a distressed baby. Not because babies understand breathing exercises, but because they respond to the person who's holding them. Your nervous system becomes contagious. Fortunately, so does calm. Of course, none of this means parents need to be calm every second of every day. That's another myth worth letting go. Some parents hear conversations about attachment and suddenly feel enormous pressure. What if I'm stressed? What if I lose my patience? What if I'm exhausted? The truth is, every parent feels those things. Every single one. There is no such thing as a perfectly regulated caregiver. And thankfully, your baby doesn't need one. Developmental psychologist Donald Winnicott introduced a concept that completely changed how experts think about parenting. He called it the good enough parent. Not the perfect parent, the good enough one. Because children don't develop through perfection. They develop through thousands of ordinary interactions that are loving most of the time. Sometimes you'll respond immediately. Sometimes you'll need a minute. Sometimes you'll misread what your baby needs. Sometimes you'll feel overwhelmed yourself. None of that ruins attachment. In fact, healthy relationships include something even more important than perfection: repair. When connection is briefly interrupted and then lovingly restored, children learn something equally valuable. Relationships can bend without breaking. That may be one of the most comforting truths every parent deserves to hear. Your baby isn't keeping score. They're not counting mistakes. They're experiencing a relationship. And relationships grow stronger through consistency, not perfection. Maybe today your baby only sleeps on your chest. Maybe tomorrow they'll nap for 20 minutes in the crib. Maybe next month they'll surprise you by sleeping longer than ever before. Development rarely happens all at once. It happens quietly, gradually, almost invisibly, until one day, you suddenly realize something has changed. The transfer works. They stay asleep. They don't need quite as much rocking anymore. Not because you forced independence, but because their brain became ready for it. That's the part many exhausted parents never get to see while they're living through the hardest nights. Nothing lasts forever. Not even this. One day you'll rock your baby for the last time without knowing it's the last time. One day they'll fall asleep beside you. Then eventually, without you. One day they'll run toward the playground instead of reaching for your arms. One day they'll hug you quickly before running off with friends. One day, they'll become the person comforting someone else. And everything they're able to give will be rooted in everything they first received. Which means that tonight, when your baby reaches for you, when they calm down against your chest, when they fall asleep listening to your heartbeat, you are not creating dependence. You are creating security. You are not preventing independence. You are quietly building it. Every cuddle, every gentle whisper, every sleepy smile, every peaceful breath they take while resting against you is helping shape a human being who will someday feel safer in the world because at the very beginning of life, they experience what safety truly felt like. And perhaps that's the greatest gift any parent can ever give. Not teaching a child to be independent as quickly as possible, but first teaching them that they never had to face the world alone. And maybe that's why this conversation matters so much. Because somewhere along the way, many parents stopped trusting what their instincts were trying to tell them. Instead, they started trusting guilt. Guilt that they're holding their baby too much. Guilt that they're creating bad habits. Guilt that they aren't teaching independence quickly enough. If you've ever felt that way, I want you to pause for just a moment. Take a deep breath. And remember something that developmental science has shown over and over again. Babies don't become emotionally healthy because they learn to need us less as quickly as possible. They become emotionally healthy because when they genuinely needed us the most, we were there. That doesn't mean you have to hold your baby every second of every day. It doesn't mean every family has to parent exactly the same way. Every baby is different. Every parent's circumstances are different. Some babies naturally sleep longer in a crib. Others need more physical contact. Some adjust to new routines quickly. Others take more time. None of those differences mean that one baby is better than another. And they certainly don't mean you're succeeding or failing as a parent. Child development has never been a race. It's a process. A beautifully messy, unpredictable process. One that unfolds at its own pace. Sometimes we become so focused on reaching the next milestone that we forget to appreciate the miracle happening right now. We wait for the first time they sleep through the night. Then we wait for the first steps. Then the first words. Then the first day of school. Then suddenly, we're looking at old photos wondering where the baby went. One day, the rocking chair that feels like your entire world right now will sit quietly in the corner of a room. One day, the tiny pajamas folded in your drawer will no longer fit. One day, your child won't fall asleep on your chest because they'll have outgrown your arms. Not because they stopped loving you, but because you gave them exactly what they needed when they were small enough to ask for it without words. The beautiful irony of secure attachment is this: children don't become independent by being pushed away. They become independent because they were first held close enough to believe the world was safe. Think about the people you admire most. The ones who face challenges with confidence. Who build healthy relationships. who recover from setbacks, who aren't afraid to ask for help when they need it. Very often, their strength wasn't built by facing life alone. It was built because someone made them feel safe enough to explore it. That's what you're doing today. Maybe it doesn't feel extraordinary. Maybe it feels repetitive. Maybe you're watching this video while your baby is asleep on your chest right now, wondering how long you'll be stuck in that chair. Maybe you're exhausted. Maybe you've reheated the same cup of coffee 3 times today. Maybe you've questioned whether you're enough. That's you. I want you to hear this. Your baby doesn't need a perfect parent. They never did. They don't need someone who never gets tired. Someone who never makes mistakes. Someone who always knows exactly what to do. They simply need someone who keeps showing up. And again. And again. Because every time you respond with love, even when you're exhausted, even when you doubt yourself, you're teaching lessons that words could never teach. You're teaching trust. You're teaching safety. You're teaching connection. You're teaching your child that difficult moments don't have to be faced alone. Those lessons won't disappear when infancy ends. They'll become the invisible foundation beneath every friendship they build, every challenge they overcome, every relationship they create, and someday, perhaps every child they hold in their own arms. So the next time your baby falls asleep against your chest, before you worry about whether you're creating a bad habit, take one quiet moment to look at them, listen to their breathing, feel the weight of their tiny body resting completely without fear. Notice how deeply they trust you. Because trust like that isn't automatic. It's earned, not through perfection, but through thousands of small moments that seem ordinary while they're happening. A cuddle before bedtime, a gentle whisper during the night, a kiss on a sleepy forehead, a comforting embrace after tears. Those tiny moments rarely feel life-changing, but when you put them together, they become a childhood, and childhood becomes adulthood. Long before your child remembers your words, their nervous system will remember how you made them feel. Safe, protected, loved, seen. That may be one of the greatest responsibilities a human being will ever have. And also one of the greatest privileges. So if you're holding your sleeping baby a little longer tonight, don't rush to put them down because someone convinced you that love creates weakness. Science tells us something very different. Love creates security. Security creates confidence. Confidence creates independence. And independence built on security lasts far longer than independence built on fear. Remember, your arms are not preventing your baby's future. They're helping build it. Thank you so much for spending these moments with us today. If this video helped you see your baby's behavior through a new lens, we'd love to hear from you. Tell us in the comments. Which part surprised you the most? Has your baby ever only wanted to sleep in your arms? Your story may be exactly what another exhausted parent needs to read tonight. And if you enjoy gentle, science-based videos that help you better understand your baby's incredible mind, don't forget to subscribe and join our growing community of parents who are learning together, one discovery at a time. Until next time, remember this: your baby isn't looking for perfection. They're looking for connection. And sometimes, the safest place in their entire world is simply your arms.